Hello and welcome to the program. The G7 summit kicked off today on the background of the risk of a trade war between the US and the rest of the world-leading economies. US President Trump's slogan, America First, might be at the expense of diplomacy here. But what are the possible outcomes of this summit? Joining us in the studio today for an overview of the event is Valeriy Kravchenko, Senior Research Fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So first question, Trump during this afternoon tweeted, that's his favorite way of communicating, tweeted that there was a possibility he would ask for the G7 for Russia to join the G7. How is it possible after the annexed Crimea? Is it possible, and what will be the consequences of such declaration?
Actually, of course, it's possible if Russia will give back Crimea and will stop the war in Ukraine. So it's the only possibility I see for such scenario. But if you are talking about such position, you know that, for example, new Prime Minister of Italy, he agreed with this tweet and with this position of Mr. Trump. Because he has a mandate from his coalition, Five Star and League North, and it is actually name it like a pro-Russian coalition and anti-sanctions coalition also. But in the same time, for example, Canada said clearly that it's impossible, and still interesting the position of France, for example, especially regarding the visit of Macron to St. Petersburg and his talkings to Vladimir Putin, and before he visited Washington. I think that it's a kind of game of Mr. Trump.
He's testing limits?
He's actually a very good player, and we just see a lot of symbols in what he doing actually, and he given a signal, some kind of signal, and just waiting for kind of reaction for this signal. But the main signal before G7, it was about the metal tariffs, and it was very clearly, exactly. And he undermined actually the idea of this summit.
Because he's clearly in confrontation here. He's like clearly looking for clashes at the very least with historical allies, and it's since like 43 years now when we never saw that kind of tensions between the G8 and, well, except when Russia was ousted. So what are the outcomes here? How do you see this unfold?
Actually, the very clear signal it was even before, because it was the first president after George Bush Jr. Which postponed the visit to Canada on 500 days. And each president of United States after the elections, it was the good tradition to visit the first Canada, because Canada is the closest partner. And Mr. Trump was, let's say, building a wall against Mexico and not visiting, and even now he's just visiting for one day and go back to Singapore to meet with Kim. Clear signal, and to Canada, to democratic states, to European Union about the priorities probably, and still he's playing. Yes, we could see a serious strategy of United States here in Europe in how to deter the aggression of Russian Federation, and military coming, U.S. militaries coming to Poland, to Baltic states, a lot of soldiers coming to this region, and it is posted in the national defense strategy of the United States, which was published just in January, that Russia it's not a threat, but it's a challenge. And what is the behavior of Trump? It's a little bit controversial to such strategy.
Yeah, because it looks like he's doing short-term, heated decisions, as while, like recently, yesterday, NATO defense ministers met to establish the 430s plan and its combat readiness plan. So yeah, there is obviously a contradiction here.
Let's say it's Trump. It's unpredictable.
That's the magic word here.
It's about the strategy of the Trump, and some people, you know, even loving him for such manner of deeds and for such behavior, and it's very strict sometimes, but not strict at all.
But it is a dangerous strategy in a way, because yesterday Emmanuel Macron with Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, talked about a G6+1. Do you think it could be possible? Do you think it could happen, and that France would have a strong stance here and say, okay, no more with that kind of frantic behavior, and we can just have a G6 now?
I don't believe in J6+1 because it's J7 actually, and it's never will be like a J8 because of Russian behavior. Yes, why it was said from Justin Trudeau, because the agenda they prepared, it's agenda directed on humanitarian details. It's like women's rights and gender equality and ecology, protection of oceans from plastic, for example. It will be totally ignored by United States, by the Trump, because, as I said, he will go to Singapore to meet Kim instead to speak on such issues. And yes, it's a pity for Canadians. They prepared this G7 summit, and they made a lot of efforts how to implement and just to make some kind of fundraising for humanitarian needs around the world. And such position of United States, it's very pity for Canadians.
And now to conclude this interview, you said Italy is backing Russia's position now because of the coalition, and recently you had Germany, who recently approved the construction of the Nord Stream 2 project. That makes two countries who are stepping in the steps of Russia here. Do you think there is a blatant strategy, there is a strategy of Mr. Putin behind it to divide and conquer Europe there, or is it is just a natural thing which is just slowly happening?
Yes, it's a strategy of Mr. Putin and to make business as usual. And while we are talking about the Nord Stream flow, for example, or other economic projects, and despite on sanctions, for example, it was signed like a 60 economic deals in St. Petersburg between French companies and Russian companies. So, and it's a clear strategy, and now Putin having this PR event, it's a World Championship in the Russian Federation, but still he's clear with efforts to make a revisionism and to make a new order here in Europe, and to put the new Russia in that new order, and just try to disintegrate, for example, existing allies, and NATO we are speaking about, for example, and summit will be NATO summit will be in July, and European Union and other platforms of Western countries, of democratic countries, and yes, it's a clear strategy for Russian Federation, and Ukrainian position here have to be to predict all these games from the side of Putin, and to speak to our allies in the West, because it's a hybrid warfare.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this overview. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today. That was Valeriy Kravchenko, Senior Research Fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you for watching the program. Stay tuned for the rest.